Obviously, Dr. Lee has been a vet here, was here in Eudora from 1975 to 2008. He came to Eudora when he was 25 years old in 1975. He is an Eudora icon because of his ability to treat Eudora's livestock and pets. He also has become heavily involved in the community. He has, the Eudora Animal Hospital continues to operate today. That was the practice he started. I want to thank our volunteer, Marty Hammond, who's here with us. All of the pictures in the presentation from the newspapers from the 1970s she found. And we put together a presentation. I want to thank Dr. Lee for bringing a lot of photos in as well to make this a nice presentation, so we're grateful for that. Please welcome Dr. Lee.
Okay, well, this is going to be fun, and I'll try to speak into the microphone so everybody can hear me. And I'm really happy to be here. And thanks, Ben, for the invitation to come and speak. And I just need to say, as a local resident, how impressed I am with the quality of our museum that we have here in Eudora. I've been around to some small towns and seen the museums that they have, and our museum that we have here is top-notch and well-ran. Asked Ben about the format for a presentation like this, and he told me to start with my background, where I was raised, where I went to school, and just kind of work my way up from there. So I was born in Borger, Texas in 1950, and we moved to Wichita in 52, and I went to school in the suburb of Hayesville through the 7th grade. And then we moved down to Oklahoma for 3 years, to Perkins, Oklahoma. After that, we moved right back to the same house in Hayesville where I picked up, forget me, Julius. This is the first picture we have here of when we first came to town in 75. And anyway, we moved back to my time in Perkins here. We moved back to Wichita, and I graduated from Campus High School in 1968. And I was kind of a skinny kid. and that was down at Perkins, and then in there I was in Wichita. I particularly loved my time in Perkins, Oklahoma. I was in the country. I had a horse. I had dogs and cats. And I got exposed to FFA down there. We had a great ag teacher, and that ag teacher really was the main influence for me picking veterinary medicine as a possibility for a career choice. There were 27 kids in our class at Perkins, and probably over 200 or so in the class at Campus High School in Wichita. And of those 27 kids, there was another veterinarian in our class. There was a veterinarian in the class behind us and another veterinarian in the class ahead of us. That was the kind of influence that ag teacher had on students. And if I wouldn't have got into vet school, I probably would have been a teacher, just because of the influence that I had with my teachers over the years, with my coaches and my ag teachers. So anyway, when I graduated from high school, I wanted to go back to Oklahoma State and go to school, Stillwater, at their vet school. But I couldn't do that because it was out-of-state tuition. And so I was stuck with going to K-State. Well, anyway, I got the best education a guy could ask for at K-State, just saying. And to get into vet school, I'll just give you a little background on that. You have to take a pre-vet curriculum, and once you get that satisfied, you can apply for vet school. You need to have good grades and some letters of recommendation. The committee will look at that, and they'll weed out people at that point. And I think the year that I applied, they had 750 applicants for 80 seats. And they weeded out over half of those just from looking at their grades and their letters of recommendations. And I was granted an interview, and I felt pretty good actually about my interview. After I got my interview over with, the only thing you had to do then was wait for them to tell you whether or not you got in or not. And the letters, the interview was in December. The letters came out in mid-March. That was the story. And so during that time, you would get a letter from the vet school And I got to tell you that the letters, when you got that letter in mid-March, if it was a fat letter, that meant you got in. If it was a skinny letter, that meant that you didn't get in, and you would have to try again the next year if you wanted to get into the vet school. So during that time when we were waiting, we'd get intermittently, we would get a fat letter from the vet school, and it would just be stuff where they were wanting more information or this and that. And mid-February, I opened up the mailbox and pulled out another fat letter, and I thought, oh dang, just more stuff I have to do or whatever, and I didn't even open it.
Oh no.
And later that evening, I opened it up, and heck, it was the mid-March letter, and I got into vet school. And so I was very happy, and just a big relief was taken off of me, because I knew from then on that if I could get through vet school now, I would be a veterinarian. I knew what I'd be doing for the rest of my life. The average back in those days was 4 years of pre-vet stuff and trying to get in, and then it was 4 years. It was four more years to get out. One particular professor that I got hooked up with, he set me up with a free place to live, and it was in the vet clinic. And there were 4 of us that did that, and we didn't have much for a facility. It was rather like an old storage closet that we lived in. It had bunk beds and 2 desks, and we had a shower and facilities across the hall. But the benefit to it was, besides it was free, and besides the point that we had to mop floors, and we got to do treatments during the night for anything that need treatments. So if anything came in emergency-wise, we also got to go down and help assist the doctors with that. So I really got a lot of experience and exposure that my classmates didn't get, because I had that opportunity to live in the vet school. Vet school was tough for me. I'm not going to say I wasn't a good. I'm not going to say that I was a good student, but what I'm going to say is I really had to work hard to learn the stuff. And I was always amazed that, as I got to know my classmates, that some of these kids just sailed right through vet school. And I would burn the midnight oil all the time. And I got to where I started drinking coffee so I could stay awake and be sharp and feel good about what I was going to have to produce on a test the next day. And then at about 3 in the morning, I'd be like, man, I think I got it. I'm going to lay down for a while and go to sleep. Well, hell, that coffee, there was no going back to sleep. So anyway, that's when I started drinking coffee back in those days. And vet school was 8 semesters, 4 years, and you took 20 to 22 hours of credit hours per semester, and it was really a load for me. I had 2 work-study programs that I did where I could actually earn some money, but it took a lot of time as well. A lot of people always ask me over the years why I picked Eudora to practice, and one of the main reasons I picked Eudora was there was a bridge across the river, and that way I could double my area conveniently. I had a bigger practice area. And the other reason I picked Eudora to practice was that Jim Hoover loaned me the money to get started. And I also wanted to kind of stay closer to family. And I had a place lined up to rent. The thing is, though, I actually looked at DeSoto to start. And I had a place over there that I could rent to have a practice there. And I was ready to go, so I went in and tried to get a loan at the bank there in DeSoto, and the guy wouldn't loan me the money. And that kind of, they told me in vet school, they told us in vet school that if you ever need to borrow money to get started, you won't have any trouble because you got this degree and that sort of thing. And I was really, looking back, I'm so glad that I did not get that loan in DeSoto, and I got to come to Eudora, because Eudora just turned out to be just a perfect place for me. That's the old vet school there. I actually lived upstairs in that place, and there's our class that we had back in '74. If you're ever up to Manhattan in the vet school, you can go look me up and see my picture. I needed a haircut real bad. I had on my fancy shirt that I owned, and that was history right there. So, so I'm set up with ready to go. I borrowed that money from Hoover to buy a practice vehicle, a veterinary box, and also some inventory. And a landline. Calvin Castle, he happened to be building a warehouse right across from the grain elevator, and he said he'd use the back half for his warehouse, and I could have the front half for a veterinary clinic. But he gave me like 2 weeks to draw out a floor plan for how I wanted him to build the floor plan inside. And so I did, and I thought it would really work out really good because it was right across from the grain elevator where all the farmers came in. And I thought I'd get exposed to people that would hopefully use me for service a lot quicker, being right across from the grain elevator. I always wanted to be a general practitioner and take care of all the species. And that was especially true for the cattle and the hogs and horses and such, along with the small animals. So I went around and I talked face to face with all the veterinarians around Eudora, and the gist of that was that everybody said, well, there's kind of a hole there between Lawrence, and Tongi, and Baldwin, and there was kind of a big area right there where each of those guys kind of picked on it, and it was kind of out of their territory in a way, and they were all real receptive to me starting out, especially Doc Wimpy. And he was my kind of veterinarian. He was a general practitioner, and he took care of all the large animal stuff mostly around Eudora. Well, he was getting older and beat up a bit, so he was wanting to wind down, and he really helped me get my foot in the door with a lot of the livestock people around town. And he was a bit of a tough act to follow because he'd practiced here for a long time, and people really liked Doc Wimpy, and now he was done, so to speak, and here I was. So he was really kind of a tough act to follow that way, but he was always real good to me. He gave me a lot of advice on business and also on treating different situations, and I just spent a lot of time with him also with the Humane Society. We did a lot of work together for the Humane Society. Anyway, so I was ready to get started, and I used my borrowed money, like I said, for a vehicle and a veterinary box and a landline and some inventory. And I really got gypped, though. I got gypped on the landline. The dang phone never rang. And I no joke, there were days when the phone did not ring at all. And I was in that building with my cat most of the time. And I checked the phone and it had a dial tone. Anyway, I got a lot of support though from Don Harris, and he ran the elevator next door, and I know he helped me get introduced to prospective producers around town and to help me get started. The other guys that really helped me were I'm going the wrong way. The other guys that really helped me was, of course, Jim Hoover, Ole Olson, the longtime advocate for Eudora, and Doc Holliday, and Tom Pyle, who ran the meat market, downtown. And Stan Burns and Doc Lauber, those people, and there was a lot more people that helped me too as well, but those are the ones that I'm going to talk to about today. I always looked up to those guys and the way they ran their businesses, and they'd been successful and been in Eudora for a long time. Stan Burns and Doc Holliday, and Doc Lauber, I liked the way they ran things, and Stan would come in after hours anytime to fill prescriptions for folks. And I never forgot the feeling I had when he came in after hours one time to fill a prescription for Jenny, and just how grateful I was that he packed up and came in and took care of me so I could have that medicine for my daughter. And Doc Holliday, he was the same way. He would see people after hours, and Doc Holliday, he was just Doc Holliday. Now, Doc Lauber, he had me test out a new casting material. He was an entrepreneur that was thought outside the box, and he developed a new casting material that he was working on. He wanted me to use it and see how it worked and keep in touch with him on how easy it was and if there were defects that he might be able to improve on. But it was a great product for stabilizing simple fractures on dogs and cats. I always reminded myself that nobody has to come to me for their veterinary service. They don't have to come to me. And I tried to give the best service that I could. A lot of my first-time clients were people that called me after hours and then stuck with me for initially being there for them at the time. CB radios were big back then. A lot of people had them, and they would juice up those CB radios, and those CB radios would reach out long ways, and people would sit around at night and talk back and forth all over the place locally here. And one day I had a first-time caller. It was Karen McCullum, and she got a hold of me. She lived across the river, and she got a hold of me. She wanted me to look at the family milk cow, and Red was a milking shorthorn cross, and she had hardware, she said, and she'd been seen by another veterinarian, but he was not going to come back, saying that he'd done all he could for her and wanted me to come out. So I examined her. I went out and examined her, and she sure had hardware, just like the other vet had said. And hardware, if you don't know, is when a cow will actually ingest a piece of wire or a nail or something sharp, because they don't have prehensive lips, and they just kind of rake the forage in and move it on down. Anyway, it'll poke a hole in her stomach right next to the heart sac, and it gets infected, and it's almost always a fatal situation for a cow. Anyway, so she had hardware, and she wasn't in very good shape at all. Anyway, I treated her my way, and by the grace of God, she got well. And she was much better the next day and just kept getting well. Well, Karen was a big-time CB person on the CB radios. And she spread the word on her CB radio. And I mean, the phone started working a lot better. She also ended up working for me for like 25 years, working for us at the clinic. I had a really good staff at the vet clinic over the years. Several of my staff people worked for me for over 30 years. And they were just regular folks that liked being in a veterinary clinic environment, and they could take care of the regular folks that called on the phone or came through the door. So one time, that's Fran, looky there, Fran, and Karen Ruggles, and Dr. Grostadier, and Shonda Berger. Shonda was a technician, and there's Karen Russell, and Courtney, and Roma. And I'll tell you a quick story about Roma. She lives here in town, Roma Tesh, and she had dogs. She's been a big dog person all her life, and I always wanted her business. And one night she called me. She had a German Shepherd female that was having trouble having pups, and Rowan knew dogs, and this and she knew this dog was in trouble. So I went over to her house and I picked the dog up and we put it in the truck, and she went with me. We went back down to the deal. We ended up doing a C-section on the dog and got it taken care of. And after that, I got to take care of her pets. Romy ended up working at the Humane Society, and I always wanted Roman to come in and work for us. So because of how she was, and eventually she did, and she's worked for us for a long time as well. Fran, I'll never forget Fran. She when she applied for her job, she came in, and I'm not a businessman, but I interviewed like prospective help like anybody else would, I guess. And Fran came in, and we went in my little office and sat down, and Fran was sitting on the edge of her seat and just ready to answer any question I had, and her had her hair all fixed up nice and everything, you know. Anyway, she was perfect. She was perfect for the job, and she ended up working for us for a long time too. One time, Karen and Fran were working for me mostly then, and I came in to the clinic. I'd been out on a country call, and it was during the harvest, and all the farmers were lined up on the hill. I don't know if you can remember that, but they had their grain trucks backed up on the hill, clear up to City Hall, basically, waiting their turn to go in and dump their grain. And to kill time, they would come over to the clinic and visit with Karen Fran in the front room. And I come walking in there, and they got to talking. And it was George Abel, I remember, because George Abel said, when you came here, we never thought you'd make it. George Abel talked, and he said, we didn't think there was enough business here around here for you to support vet. Anyway, I was just like, oh man, I've just stunned me. Because there was never a doubt in my mind that I would make it. And Eudora was just a perfect place and time for me. I always tried to help any species that would present itself, and Penny Von Auken, she was one of my early clients, and she came in the door with a turtle that had a cracked shell, and we worked on that turtle, and Benny Dean, who has done so much work with Bill Gordon and others on our museum that we have in town. Benny, he was into chickens. He had all these show chickens, and he would go take them to Kentucky and to these big livestock shows. But he had his ducks in a row with those chickens, and I didn't have to do much except look and make sure they weren't coughing or had diarrhea or something, and sign some health papers for him, and he could take it from there. And then I had Gene Ackerman. He was a Bell Telephone guy, and he had a menagerie of domesticated wild animals. He had mountain lions, a bear, albino raccoons, an albino possum, and I'm not a fan of having wild animals like that, but he did, and he took really good care of them. And the story I got about him was he had a cougar named Mercury, female, and she had to see that she was having growths, and she had breast cancer really bad. And so the only thing we could do back in those days was to remove all that stuff, because they'll end up abscessing and just horrible. And so, those big spools that the phone cables came on, well, he had those in his backyard back there. And so we used that for a surgery table under an elm tree, and we were able to anesthetize that mountain lion and stretch her out. And when I got her stretched out and saw what I had ahead of me, it was like, man, I got after it, because it was really an aggressive situation. And I got the last stitch in there about the time she was ready to wake up, and 3 weeks later I came back, and we did the same thing again, and later down, and because I needed to take out the stitches that I'd put in, and honest to God, I could not believe how that animal had healed up, and I was expecting drainage and stitches gone from the cat stung, licking, and it healed up slick. I always told about I've always been told about how wild animals, they can heal up and all this stuff, and but it was just amazing how that cat healed up. And then you've got other people that have some exotic pets like hedgehogs, little hedgehogs, and pocket pets they call them, gerbils, hamsters, and guinea pigs. And I really like fooling with them. And the people are genuinely attached to those, just like you would be attached to your dog. Anyway, we outgrew the physical facility there at the elevator about the time K10 was opening up. And I tried to buy some ground out there, but the owner wouldn't even talk to me because I was not a long-time resident. I was kind of an outsider, and I had this friendship with Mike Westerhouse, and we talked, and he said, well, whichever one of us get it bought, we'll let the other guy in. Well, I wasn't going to get it bought, and Mike did. And I guess the Westerhouse clan, the name, that's a long enough time to be around to justify getting a piece of ground from this lady. And so anyway, he was a great friend for me, Mike was. We hunted and fished, and a couple of times we went to the opening day at Royal Stadium, and we would eat Brian's barbecue before the game, so we were really living large. I was really looking forward to spending time with Mike later on in our retirement. Anyway, as far as the business, I was never really interested in the business aspect of veterinary medicine, and honestly, I really never even balanced the checkbook. It just all kind of took care of itself, along with the help I had at the bank from Jerry Abel at the bank. It didn't take Jerry long she had my account number memorized, and she was an excellent employee for the bank, and the bank, all the employees there put up with me. One night I got one of those after-hour calls for a heifer calving, and it was clear on the southwest side of Lawrence. And this was early on, and my truck, I was just about out of gas in the truck. And Lowell Henderson, he was at 10th and Main, and he was already closed. And Lowell with the Jayhawk oil, and he would always carry me for a month, and I could pay him once a month. And anyway, so he was already closed, so that was out. So I thought, well, maybe I got enough gas to get to the client's place I hadn't been to before, but it was quite a ways away, and maybe he could help me with some gas, And the other thing was I had about $7 in my pocket. So anyway, I went down to Sibleyville Road, and I went by Harold Bowley's there, and he was still milking. And the lights were on, I seen him in there, so I turned around and went back, and I'd been to his place earlier, and I turned around and I went back, and I told him short on gas and short on cash, and I wondered if he'd trade some gas for some penicillin, for a bottle of penicillin. And he said it'd be all right. And we sat down, and he put the pump in there and let it drain in there, and we're talking, and pretty soon he shut it off and put it up, and he said, well, that ought to get you down the road. And okay, thanks so much. And I got in to take off to go deliver that calf. Looked down there at my gauge. My God, he gave me a whole bunch for a little bottle of penicillin. Anyway, the small animal business really took off after we got on 10 Highway, and that kind of hurt my feelings in a way, because I always thought people I wanted people to come to us because of who we were and how we did things, and not because we were a convenient stop on 10 Highway. And Paul Grossdeer, he was my first associate, and I was waiting on Paul, busier than heck, and I waited 2 years for Paul to get out of vet school so I could hire him. And I wanted to hire him because he was Grossdeer. He was a long-time family name in this area, and also because he grew up on a dairy, and those dairy guys, kids, they've got a really good work ethic about them. I had several other associates over the years, and there's a picture of Paul there too, youngster. Anyway, one of them was Kurt Wisniewski, and he came from North Dakota, and he was really good with the clients, and he was an excellent bovine cattle practitioner, and I learned a lot from Kurt. And he comes back, he lives in Alaska now, and he comes back down here once in a while, and we always go to set him up jacks and get the old crew together and have a get together. So as time went on, the cattle were beating me up pretty good, and I ended up having to get both my shoulders replaced and my knees replaced, and I like to say that the cows finally won. And I also like to think that I actually served close to 2 careers time-wise just from all the hours that I put in. In 2007, I lost 2 veterinary classmates, lost them from a brain bleed and a heart attack. And that kind of opened my eyes a bit, because there's other things I wanted to try to enjoy, some of the other things for life on the planet. So I ended up selling everything to the 3 vets that were working for me in 2008. And I'm going backwards again. There we go. And that was George Schreiner, Dr. Schreiner. And Dr. Schreiner is the only one left at this point. And he was another kid that I heard, and one thing he had going for him was that he grew up on a dairy farm, and he had that really good, aggressive work ethic about him. I continued to work on Saturdays for the clinic. So there's Dr. Shane, he was one of the 3, and John Haggard. And I continued to work on Saturdays after I sold it at the clinic, because if I worked on Saturday, then one of the boys would actually get 2 days off in a row. And eventually I quit in 2013 and turned in my license. Lastly, I'd like to visit for a bit about how veterinary medicine has progressed during my tenure. And I use that word tenure because, because thanks to Cindy Higgins and her digging up the history of veterinary medicine in our area, I wasn't the first to set up and practice in this area. There were several self-proclaimed veterinarians that were around from the 1890s to the 1920s. And when I found out about all this, it kind of hurt my feelings, because I was kind of proud that I was the first veterinarian to be in Eudora. But I would sure love to sit across the table from those guys that were back in the day, and just to hear how it really was back in those days. I started out my practice with just the very basic equipment, and I ended up getting an X-ray machine from a classmate that scrounged out 2 from some old chiropractor down in southeast Kansas, where he was opening up a practice similar to mine. And I still had to develop the X-rays myself, and I had to evaluate what was going on by taking the X-rays and get that information. I had a 2-hour course in radiology that was really worth about 8 hours. As far as time-wise it took, it was the flunk-out course for for vet students to get through that particular 2-hour course. And anyway, nowadays in practice, they have a digital x-ray machine, and they can send the radiographs in electronically to a board-certified radiologist, and he can look at the film and the history and send back a diagnosis. My clinic, the old clinic, initially I had a centrifuge, and I could spin blood down, and I could do blood smears and stain them, and I had classes that I had taken in vet school to train me to help me make a diagnosis on an individual I could get a sample of if I needed to. The Lawrence Hospital would also take my samples and run some lab tests for me at the Lawrence Hospital. And the techs there, I dropped those samples off, and they were always glad to see me because it seemed like they got a kick out of working with something other than the human blood. It was something different for them, and they wanted to know, well, what's this sort of mean? What, you know? And then next time they come in, well, how'd that last dog do, or whatever? So it was that kind of situation. I also had access to the veterinary diagnostic lab at K-State to lean on, and I could send in samples, and I'd pack them in dry ice, and I'd send them up on the Greyhound bus in Lawrence to Manhattan. Sometimes there were instances where we'd have to send up a brain or a head from an animal that may have had rabies, and there were people exposed. And so I'll tell you about an episode that I had with a horse that had rabies. This client, it was Ellis Hayden, and he was the general lived south of Lawrence, and he had some brood mares and a really nice leopard Appaloosa. And if you don't know what a leopard Appaloosa is, they're basically a white horse with the either brown or black spots all over them, and they're really a stunning looking, beautiful animal. And that was his stud that he used on his mares. And I got done vaccinating the mares and got that taken care of, and he said, hey, while you're here, can you take a look at the stud? And so we went in the barn to take a look, and there this stud was in a stall. And I never have seen an animal like this. This is the only animal that I've ever seen like this. And it was trembling, just shaking all over with his head down and making these weird noises. And it was like, wow, you know, it stunned me. And I hadn't looked at him for 10 seconds, and Ellis was saying, what's he got, dog? What's wrong with him? You know, and I said, well, let's get him out of the stall and move him around in the paddock. And so Ellis cracked that door of that stall, and that horse bolted through, about knocked us down, and took off out there to the paddock. And he's out there running around bucking and kicking and making these weird noises and just totally out of character. Anyway, so with my infinite knowledge, I was still in the paddock, and I thought, well, I'm going to walk out there and grab the lead, and so I can get a look at him and such. I started walking towards that horse, and that horse looked at me, and he got a bead on me. I see him looking today just straight at me, and he ran hard right at me, and he was probably 60 feet away or so, and I seen him coming. I headed for the fence and got over the fence. Ellis luckily was already on the other side of the fence. Anyway, and then he went around showing off again, kicking and bucking and making them gurgly weird noises and stuff. And Ellis is saying, what's he got, dog? And I said, well, I need to call the diagnostic lab and talk to him. So we went up the house, and I called up the lab and got a hold of the doc up there. And I knew the doc from when I'd lived in the vet clinic there, and he knew me. And I told him what I'd seen, and I told him I thought maybe he'd had equine encephalitis possibly, and he said, yeah. He said, that's a possibility. He said, you need to check him for rabies too. And he says those people have been exposed, and him acting like that. Well, to check a horse for rabies, if you can't get access to their brain, and this is a valuable animal, and Ellis wasn't up to putting him down to dig out a brain to send up there. We're going to try to treat him, and to to diagnose it, you have to get their whiskers. They have these long whiskers on their nose and on their chin, and you have to dig them out, root and all, and send them up to the lab on the bus, and they'll run the tests, and they had an accurate test they could run, and they could tell you if the horse had rabies or not. Well, I said, man, this is a dangerous animal here, and he's tried to run over us, and he's crazy, and he said, just rope him and choke him down and jump on him and jump on him and give him anesthetic until he goes to sleep, and anesthetize him, he said, and then dig those whiskers out, root and all. Okay, so I went out there and I roped him, and he choked himself down, and I jumped on him, and I got the medicine in his blood, and I pushed it in there, and I gave him a dose that would knock a regular horse out, and it didn't do anything to him. And I loaded my syringe up again real quick, and I gave him another dose, and I could tell he was a little bit drowsy, but there wasn't no way I was going to be cutting whiskers out of him. And so I gave him another dose, and no joke, it took 3 doses of anesthetic, and I'm scared it's going to kill him, but it took 3 doses of anesthetic to get him to where I could get the whiskers out. And so Ellis and his wife, they ended up, I think, driving to Lawrence and taking the samples up to Lawrence, and I dumped a bunch of antibiotics and steroids in him, and left him in the paddock, and he woke up and everything and was crazy as he was before we started, and I just told him leave him alone and let's see what the doc says. And the next morning they called and said it was a hot case of rabies. And so those Ellis and his wife, they ended up taking the shots because they'd been fooling with that horse for a week like that, that spring, it was in the spring, and that spring I ended up having 4 cases of rabies. And I had a horse, and I had a cow, and I had 2 dogs that had rabies. And the thing that was interesting about that is that they all were, if you put them on a map, they were all in a line from the Johnson County line, basically back and along the Sibleyville Road to south of Lawrence. So that was kind of interesting. Let's see where I am here. Anyway, I had this 4-wheel drive vehicle now that I talked about with the custom veterinary box in the back, and that box I bought with my bank money, and it had a refrigerator in it for temperature control, and I could keep my drugs cool that needed to be, and vaccines and any samples or anything, and they were custom made for veterinarians, and I think I wore out 3 of those things in my tenure. I had my sterile packs, wraps, bandages, about everything I needed for common wire cuts or gilding horses, C-sections, and abdominal surgeries on cattle, and my trusty catch rope, and a calf puller. And really nothing's really changed on that over the years, except most of the critters get hauled in nowadays, and they don't use the mobile stuff near as much. One spring, I just got a new truck, and in the spring, there was lots of after-hours work with all the birthing that's going on, and processing fall calves, and a lot of herd work. And I got that late Saturday night call for a birthing up in those hills north and west of Tonganoxie. It was late at night, and I just pulled on my coveralls over my shorts and took off. And you can get lost up there in those hills. And it was a wet spring, and the lots would suck your boots off. And I found those folks. I'd never been to their place before. It was another one of those first-time deals. And I found them, and we went out there. The heifer was loose in a small lot. And when she saw me, of course, she jumped up and took off. And with the help of the owner, though, and his kids, we got her cornered. And I roped her, and I snubbed her up to a post, and I got the calf. But I really got muddy, and I was really muddy. And anyway, we went back to the house and settled up and I kind of got hosed off a little bit and cleaned up, and I went back to the truck and opened the door and I said, oh, man, I'm not going to get in that nice new truck and ruin that. It still smelled new in there, you know. So I took off my coveralls and stepped out of my boots and took off my coveralls, threw them in the back and got in, and I had on my underwear and my socks. So I got back to Tongi and I was going through town, Tongi, and there's an alcohol check going on. I ended up being the third in line, and I thought, well, should I just make a run for it? You know, if I did that, they're going to think, hey, they come get him, you know, he's been drinking, whatever. And so now I just sit there, and when it came my turn, I could see the deputy that was working, and he was a tall guy, and I actually had played basketball against him on town team stuff there before, and I'd actually had pulled him out of the snowbank that winter, and he was stuck in with his patrol car, and I always kept a tow rope, and I pulled him out, and so we knew each other, and anyway, when it came to be my turn, I kind of got the truck rolled, and I leaned down and said, hey, I've been out delivering a calf north of town, and he just kind of looked at me, and then he realized who I was, and said, oh yeah, go on. And he let me off the hook. Anyway, let's see what else we got. Oh, the other thing is that I drove real fast back in those days because I won't say I was always behind, but I tried to keep on time, and if there was an emergency, I was going to get out there as quick as I could. And I'd meet those guys on the blacktops, and I never got a ticket from those guys. And the other part of this story is that I was in Chumley's, I think it was at that time, had the store, and I was in there, and this lady walked up, young lady, she walked up to me, and she said, she knew I was the vet, I guess, and she walked up to me and said, do you remember coming out and delivering that calf for us? And, you know, and she told me up north, and she said it was real muddy and got all dirty and everything. And I thought, oh, yeah, I remember that one all right. So anyway, nowadays, serious producers around, they've got facilities on their place to handle the livestock. And veterinarians that deal with large animals have haul-in facilities at their clinic. Back in my day, I was lucky to have a solid post or a tree to tie them to, and if they had an alleyway with a head kitch on the end, it was exceptional. We would always have large animal emergencies, and I would take care of them when they happened, and we would have to work them into our schedule. Back in the dial tone days, here's my schedule. I would get up, and if there were any situations that needed to be taken care of promptly, I would take care of that. Then I would do my small animal surgeries, and then I would see some small animal appointments, and then I would go out in the country and see the large animal appointments. And then I was back in the clinic finishing up with more small animal appointments. That was how my days would go. And if we got a large animal emergency in the morning, the staff would get on the phone, start changing appointments around, and I would take off and take care of the emergency. If a client called in with an emergency and I was already out in the country, the staff would try to have them call the farm I was working at and get me lined up, or the client would drive over wherever I was themselves and get me lined up and tell me to come there next. Well, it was hard work, and once I was out, I just getting done at North Grosseteers, and Mrs. Grosseteer came out and tell me that Gabriel's had a calving issue, go there next. So there must have been something about her seeing me put in a prolapsed uterus on a heifer. It must have triggered her, because I got in the truck and I was getting ready to leave, and just before I was getting ready to leave to go to Gabriel's, and she came out with a pint of milk and some chocolate chip cookies. And that was common. They always took good care of me with stuff like that. Lots of times, it was kind of like they were giving me a treat, you know, for being out there. So lots of times I would have a meal with these folks after working their cattle, and we'd have meat and potatoes and all the fixes and pie, cobbler, cake, whatever. And then she would always fix me up with some leftovers to take along with me for later on. And it was an event for a lot of clients to have the vet come out and work cattle in the fall or in the spring or both. And when they were done, they would usually have that big feed like that. Usually there were neighbors there that would be there to help as well. Well, I wasn't getting lunch every day, and most of the time I didn't have time to get lunch. I was busy, and with all this large animal stuff in the spring, especially, it seemed like every day for 6 days a week, that was my routine. And on Sundays and holidays, I always had emergencies to take care of. Sometimes when I'd go through town, I would stop at Delmer's if I had time for lunch. And this was after his days of running the bar, and he had rented what I think is the lodge now, and he had a little lunch area there, and he would cook up ham and beans or chili, and I think it was more just a place for he and his buddies to hang out and play pitch later on. And they played a lot of pitch there. So I remember the ham and beans and the chili in particular, and it'd be cold and crappy out, and I'd go in there all been working. I'd go in there, and Delmer would fix me up. He liked me. And when I would show up, he would pile it on for me. I had my own big bowl there, and I had this big spoon that he always served me with. And Fred Treffs hung out there too. And Freddie, I really liked Fred. He was a very unique individual in the way he ran his business, and just the personality that he had. He would always give me heck about being a K-State boy, and I would razz him about the Jayhawks. So I got one up on him one time when I had gotten access to some K-State decals and stickers, and his truck was sitting outside Delmer's, and the windows were down. I crawled in there, and I rolled up the window, and I stuck all those stickers on the driver's side window, and then I rolled it back down. And I knew that when he rolled it up, that K-State stuff would be staring him right in the face. And so the next time I came into Delmer's, and there he was, and he jumped up and started punching me and shaking his finger at me and such, and gave me a good scolding. So it was great fun. A lot of my long-time old clients have passed on, and when Fred's time came, I planned on attending the wake. Anyway, I got really busy, and I saw that I wasn't going to make it in time to clean up to go to the wake. So I just went as I was, and I barely made it. And I just caught the kids were still there. Everybody else was gone. And little Freddie, he said to me, "We were wondering about you," and they were really happy to see me, and we had a nice visit. And he raised up some really good kids. I was sure to include large animal facilities in the new clinic, because most of the clients nowadays have trailers and such, and they can bring the animals in. But I really preferred going out for birthings and such, prolapses, because of all the stress of hauling them in. When I went through vet school, I had a special professor that taught us how to behave in the exam room with your clients, and how to work it. And he emphasized taking a thorough history from the owner and giving the patient a thorough physical exam. And small animal services were on the upswing for us. And I had farm people would come in, like with a cat, and they would tell me, "Don't tell anybody that I was in here with a cat." But especially with the small animal patients, the owners, they really know their pet. They've been with them, and they are attached to them, and they know them. and it's really helpful, and you can get to the root of a lot of their problems if you listen to the client and what they can tell you about their pet. Back in the dial tone days, we did not have access to complete blood panels, and for a long time we didn't have any X-ray machine or anything. Nowadays, they have state-of-the-art radiology, and you can consult or possibly refer to board-certified ophthalmologists, neurologists, oncologists, internal medicine specialists, cardiologists, radiologists, and pet psychologists and pathologists. And that's what they have. That's what we have for help with the general practitioner these days. And speaking of dial tones, back in the day, there were times when the phone would go out for whatever reason. And so you go next door or find a phone that would work or whatever and call in the issue. And the usual response from Bell Telephone was like it'd be a 5-day wait before they can get a serviceman out there or whatever. Well, Keith Harold, he was a client of ours, and I called him the phone guy in town. And I would go get in the truck and go drive around town till I could find him, and I'd tell him what's going on, and he'd have us up and running in no time. And that was just another good thing about small town America. Nowadays, I kind of dragged my feet about getting computerized, but I'm glad we did. But nowadays, if that computer goes out, man, you're screwed. So the only thing I ever knew was unplug it and plug it back in. It seems like we always had a lot of kids that sometime in their life, especially the girls, would want to be veterinarians. And growing up, they'd want to be a veterinarian. And I always tried to give these kids a chance to see what private practice was all about. Over the years, we had a dozen or so of these kids that went on and actually became veterinarians. And others ended up being nurses in the human field or veterinary technicians. And I'll tell you about a couple of them. One was Jensen Heron. And she would, there's Jensen. She would tag along with her grandma, who was Jackie Ayler, and they would come in, and Jensen was just this high, and she would be behind her grandma and be looking up and watching what was going on. And I remember her as a young girl doing that. When Jackie would bring in the family dogs over the years. So in 6th grade, I saw where Jensen had been awarded Student of the Month. And she mentioned me as her most inspirational individual. And she said she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. Well, she grew up, and she was one of those smart ones. And she sailed right through vet school. And she's now living her dream practicing small animals out in a busy practice near Denver. I got to teach a class or two for Mrs. Lawrence at the high school for the biology students, and I always took my parasite samples in the jars and such, and I had a dog that I would take, whatever dog I had at the time, I would take, and we'd talk about heartworms, and I'd let them listen to the heart on the dog, and they'd all line up, and Anyway, and I tried to help out the 4-H kids with their animal projects when I could. I remember one time I was at a 4-H meeting, and I was given my spiel on parasites, and I had the jar with the heartworms in it, and I told them I had to have a fresh sample for them that I picked up today, and all these little kids are sitting there, and I reached in the bowl and picked it up, and it was spaghetti. Anyway, so you can guess what happened next. I took it and just like that, and those kids just so anyway, that was great fun. And later on, I remember, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years later, you remember when you ate the worms? And they didn't forget that. I have a lot of mixed feelings about nowadays, a lot of practices, they don't take their emergency calls. And at quitting time, they'll turn the phone over to the emergency clinics. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about that, because if you do take your emergency calls, your personal family experience are compromised a lot. And I always thought that you had to take care of your patients, and whether it was just routine stuff or if there was an emergency, you needed to be, if you were available, you needed to take care of your patients. And there's lots of ups and downs in this profession. It can be very stressful. You're dealing with living individuals, humans and animals, and in a lot of situations beyond your control, they can stick in your head, and you get where you wake up and you can't go back to sleep or whatever. I actually lived in a small apartment in a new clinic for 7 years to help make the payments, and veterinary medicine kind of was a way of life for me. I still get calls now for advice. Once in a while, people will call, and I'll answer my phone, and I visit with old clients, and they got questions they want to ask me, and I'm all good for that. And I'm always bumping into clients out in public, and it's great to see them and have a visit with them, and I really appreciate them saying hello to me. And many of those clients, they say, "Man, I wish you were still there," and others are happy that I'm having my retirement. I am enjoying my retirement. I haven't had a board day since I've been retired. Busy, I'm busy as I want to be. I really enjoyed my time serving Eudora, just like I'm enjoying now my retirement time. I've remodeled my house twice. I've built onto my shop building twice. Lately I had an aggressive insert put in my fireplace, and I burned 5 cords of wood last winter. And staying ahead of the firewood keeps me busy. And where I live, it's a great place for me. It's the first house Danny Shockley built, and it got 20 acres of woods. One summer, I drove up to Alaska, and I stayed 3.5 months. I went just about everywhere you could go. In a pickup truck. I sent home 100 pounds of salmon fillets, 500 pounds of moose meat, 70 pounds of caribou. I caught a lot of rainbows, silver salmon, grayling. I watched grizzly bears, black bears, moose, caribou, sheep, wolverines, eagles, ravens, puffins on the coast, all kinds of geese and ducks, and some really cool sandhill cranes. I think while I was up there, I caught every fish there was up there, and some of them twice. I met a lot of nice folks up there, and I racked up a lot of memories. I really liked the Dakotas and Wyoming, Oklahoma, and Montana. I like fishing, and I like spending nights out camping and looking at the stars. And there's a lot of places that I think I could have been perfectly happy, but I'm certainly okay with how things went for me here in Eudora. It became my home. I think our town is in good shape now with Dr. Schreiner and his crew. And he has another veterinarian, a local veterinarian working for him now, Matt Kelso, who persevered to become a veterinarian, and now he's set up for his hard 40 sentence. So, Dr. Schreiner, it won't be long before you'll be up here giving the Historical Society your presentation of more history in veterinary medicine in Eudora. People always ask me who my first small animal client was. I don't know if anybody knows this lady. And she was just a young girl when she first came in, and she had her dog, and this dog meant the world to her. And she was the first small animal adventure I had. And now, there she is now, and her mother was also one of our dear clients for years. And then they asked about my first large animal client. Pops it was an after-hours call, And I lived in a house I rented a house from Larry Wilson over a mile east of town, and Pops lived, I don't think, even a mile down the road. So I was right there after he called, and he had a fat steer that was bloated. And so we was in the barn with him, and we put the nosers in him and snubbed him up and put the speculum in and passed the tube and let all that gas come off of him. And I had that steer in a headlock like this working him, and Pops had his arm around the other side, and our heads were about this far apart. We were trying to get that off. I ended up doing a lot of work for him over the years, and there was a lot of the longtime producers in the area that I just had the best relationships with, that were priceless to me. So that's pretty much all I got.
Okay, well, I'm gonna leave now. We're gonna demonstrate an animal surgery that will, come on up. Take care of you right there. Anyway, I don't know if we want to do that or not, if somebody has any kind of question they can without knowing the answer to it, I'll try to help them right quick.
Anybody got any questions?
Animal hospital.
That's cool.
All right.
Said it all.